Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with lead set designer for TFT Reckoning, Riot Wittrock, and we are here to talk to you today about the champions and traits. How's it going, Wittrock?
It's going well. Excited to finally talk about all this stuff and kind of give an overview of the set. So
Sweet. All right, yeah, we're just going to go over the champions and traits. There's two other videos, one for system changes, one for shadow items. If you want more information on those, go check them out. But yeah, let's dive into it. This isn't going to be super detailed. This video is coming out Tuesday morning. PBE should be up later today if all goes well, if not tomorrow. You've probably got a bunch of stuff from people yesterday. But we did want to kind of go over the traits and maybe point out a few key champions. So, sound good?
yeah, if we were to talk about everything, we'd be here for 5 hours or something like that. So this will be a more of a rundown overview type thing.
Perfect. All right, let's talk Origins first. Now, Origins, you kind of split up into sort of like good and evil theme. Is that right?
Correct. We're Reckoning is all about the battle between good and evil, and so you'll notice that every origin except one, which we'll get to, is very split between either all good or all evil. We're
Sweet.
starting with evil.
All right, let's start with evil. We are starting off with Forgotten. Forgotten's an interesting one. Oh my god, I'm blocking these. Oh well. My pictures are blocking the numbers. Damn it. I should fix this. Oh well, we'll keep going. So Forgotten is an interesting one because it interacts with our set mechanic, the shadow items, in that the more shadow items you have, the more powerful your Forgotten gets. Is that right?
Yes, and if you want to see information, we're going to talk about shadow items at a few different points in this video, so go watch the shadow items video, which is the set mechanic video. But know that shadow items are a thing you can get, and this trait benefits from that. The other fun thing about this trait is it's very large. 9 units is a lot of champions to have in a trait. That means there's a lot of different ways to build this, either as a full 9-unit set or a 6-piece with some splashes. And there's a lot of different carries in this. There's ways to play around Vayne, and obviously Draven is in this set, Viego, Katarina. So if you want to try to jump into the set and jump into shadow items, Forgotten's a good synergy to go.
Yeah, what I love about Forgotten when we've playtested it is that it makes you kind of want to get unoptimal items to try to maximize the number of shadow items you can get so that you can get the full bonus, because the bonus is very powerful, and when you get the extra 40%, that's really nice. But sometimes you're like, maybe I'll pass on this Infinity Edge for a Shadow Bloodthirster just to get that extra trade-off, and that ends up feeling pretty fun.
Yep. So excited for... this is pure offensive power, attack damage, ability power. All of these units benefit heavily from those effects. So,
yep. And then let's see. This is the only other call out here. This is the first trait we've ever produced that has 9 champions by default. Its 9-piece is not a prismatic trait. It's just a gold one. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it means that you have this opportunity to go up to 9. There's no chosen in the set, though, which means that you have to actually be level 9 and have 9 units in, or have a Force of Nature, so it's still not easy to obtain. But I don't think you'll also always want to go exactly 9, right? There is value in stopping at 6 and mixing in other units, or maybe you're only running this as a 3 in some context. So hopefully there's still some good decision-making there. I think there were 9 Wardens in set 2, but there was no 9-piece, so not quite the same.
Fair enough. All right, we'll talk about specific champions a little later, I think, here from these ones. Okay, Nightbringer. Nightbringer... they gain a shield that helps prevent them from dying, and then when they gain that shield, they sort of power up and gain extra damage.
Yeah, so Nightbringer is another one of our evil origins that is also a vertical, which is kind of just means that there's at least 6 units and you can build around it as kind of your core trait. This is all about kind of this mix of offense and defense. These units can survive in the front line. Things like Vladimir, Sejuani, Lee Sin, basically everyone in this group, minus Aphelios, who has his own ways to benefit from the trait, is likely to take some damage and gets a lot of benefit from dropping below that 50% and then kind of amplifying their own damage.
Yep. At its core, the late game fantasy here seems to be Darius as sort of the leader of the group, with his powerful spell that shreds armor, combined with then Aphelios in the background doing mostly physical damage with his spell. And so then when the armor is shred, that ends up being a pretty powerful combo. And then using the other Nightbringers to just kind of keep your team alive, use their utility. Diana's got that massive backline disruption. Morgana's got that frontline CC. So it ends up being a pretty cool, pretty straightforward comp, but also a lot of ways you can, like, maybe I'll run 6 and alter this, or maybe I'll run 4, and there's a bunch of cool ways to play this.
Yeah, exactly what you said. I'd suspect a lot of the time this is going to be around playing around Aphelios and Darius. Occasionally you might have a scenario, though, where you 3-star your Morgana or your Yasuo, or maybe you're playing, you have a Vladimir early that you happen to 3-star and want to build around that. All these champions at their core get good benefit from this trait. So it's more around who can you itemize, who can you get to a high star level and build around that adds some flexibility here.
Yep. Sweet. That's Nightbringer. Let's keep going. Coven. Coven is an interesting trait because it's the first time we've had a trait where the trait doesn't benefit the champions.
Yes, Coven is all about empowering one particular unit, whether it be one of your Coven champions or any other champion in the set that benefits from the 2 things that you're getting here: ability power and then mana, assuming you can keep your Coven champions alive. Also, this is a positioning puzzle a bit as well. The Coven leader that gets all these bonuses is whoever is nearest to the center of your army. If you're wondering what that means, definitely get your hands on this either on PBE or on live or see if there ever was a place to put a GIF or a video here, this would have been it, which is it'll be very apparent once you play this trait what that means.
Yeah. I think we've seen some pretty fun combos. I think from our playtest, the most memorable one, at least I had, was the Coven leader Ivern, where they just kept giving him mana to make sure that Daisy kept coming out and casting. Do you have any particular favorites that stood out? Any favorite Coven leaders?
I mean, I've played with, going back to Nightbringer, Coven leader Lee Sin, who does a lot of kind of repeatable damage around himself, has been very strong. I'm pretty sure we've seen a Coven leader, Garen, that has done more damage than we may have anticipated. It's, wow, getting a lot of this concentrated benefit can be very good. Or just, these are all 3 ability power casters as well. So make your Morgana your leader, make your LeBlanc and assassinate their backline, make your 3-star Lysandra your carry. Those should be kind of the standard options. But this is one of the traits where I'm excited to see players start to explore it, and I suspect it'll take some time for players to kind of gravitate towards what are the best Coven leaders in the set.
Sweet. Also love that there's a spatula here, so you can actually, again, make a interesting Coven. Like, you can do some pretty crazy stuff if you get the spatula.
Yes.
Which will be a recurring theme.
Yep.
Okay, Hellion. Hellion, I think, is definitely one of the more unique traits, and I've seen some confusion, so let me explain. By default, as long as you have at least 3 Hellion, whenever a Hellion dies, so let's say you have a 2-star Poppy, a Doppel Hellion of the same type with 1 less star level and no items jumps from a portal on your board. So as soon as that 2-star Poppy dies, out comes a 1-star Poppy that will then join the fight. So you'll, like, let's say you're level 5 and you have 5 Hellions. You'll never have more than 5 units on the board, but you will have a lot of effective health and a lot of ways to keep things off your backline. This definitely feels like the swarm of Yordles. Pretty fun. And then, of course, Teemo to top it off. So this is a great trait.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of ways to play around this concept of just having a lot of effective health on your team. Your opponent has to chew through a lot of units. So the most traditional way to play this is early game, you're just protecting your Ziggs, who's pumping out a lot of damage. If you can get to Teemo in the later part of the game, assuming you've preserved enough health to pay for his health cost rather than his gold cost, he's a great way to kind of get a first or a second with this composition. Also, you don't need, although the bonus also gives some attack speed that favors making one of the Hellions your carry, just using the trait itself as sort of a wall of bodies to keep other backliners safe is, we've seen, be effective as well. Brand is someone I've seen make good use of the like having the Hellion trait in. He's also a Spellweaver, so he's getting ability power. There's lots of casts going on, which we'll talk about why that benefits Spellweaver later, but his spell is a damage damage over time, like really, really slow burn. So if he can get a fight to go 20, 25, 30 seconds long, he gets the most value out of his spell. So in some ways, you should be either thinking about this as a way to make Hellions carries or a kind of a frontliner trait to really protect key backliners.
Yep. One of my favorite moments from playtest was when we got a Hellion Spatula, and I applied it to a Volibear, because then you have a 2-star Volibear jumping in, doing his ult, and then he dies, and out comes a 1-star Volibear doing it again. That is definitely one of the highlights, and so Hellion Spatula is another one that can end up being really fun.
Yep, great on like powerful single cast units that you want to get a second bite of that also aren't super reliant on their star level to make their spell powerful. So I'm ready to see players get their hands on this one as well.
Nice. All right, Dragon Slayer. This is an interesting one because it's not really a vertical per se. And a lot of these champions actually have pretty high output already. So you can usually give them defensive items. But basically, they gain some ability power. And then if you can kill a sort of bigger unit at 1400 health, so not as harsh as like Giant Slayer, but still you got to kill something big, then they give a bunch of ability power to not only themselves, but their team. So for example, a 4 Dragon Slayer Mordekaiser that has killed a target gets 100 extra ability power and 40 for his team. So
yeah, I think the first thing you said was very important, which is everything else up until this point, most origins will tend to be what we call vertical, something that you can build around as the core of your team. In a lot of ways, they're kind of the easier things to play, especially early in a set. This is not that. This is, if you're going into a game and you're saying, I'm playing Dragon Slayer this game, you're probably doing it wrong because it's both difficult to navigate your way into a set of more expensive units, and it has some situationality to it, right? Like if your lobby is just not very tanky or there's very few high-star champions, you might have some difficulty activating this bonus. However, if those circumstances align, there's very powerful things you can do. The star of the show here is certainly Mordekaiser, who's a very hard-hitting, big shield ability power carry, so him getting large amount of AP here is great. There's also a few other ways to play around with this. Diana is backline disruption, but can do some good damage. And Trundle, we've seen some very scary Trundles given enough ability power. So I watch out for 3-star Trundle as well.
Yep. Yeah, Mordekaiser is one of the more interesting carries this set because he's melee, but AP, which we haven't done a ton of. Very low attack speed, very high base damage. So when he hits you with that hammer, he's usually one-shotting fools with it.
Scary stuff.
Nice. All right. Abomination. Now this is probably the most popular trait from our playtest, at least. I think we see an Abomination every game. And, you know, the Reddit response will be, oh, it's just Cultist and Mech combined. And it kind of is to some extent. But why don't you talk about Abomination here?
Yeah, so this is a method of creating an additional unit we call the Monstrosity. And it's got some pieces of Mech Pilot. It's got some pieces of Cultist. But the way it actually plays out is fairly different for 2 core reasons. So to talk about some of the details here, first is just the structure, right? Mech was, you needed exactly 3 units. There was basically no flexibility in how you could play the trait. Cultist had these larger breakpoints, which also meant there was low flexibility. Here, you're going to see some early game 2 or 3 piece Abomination. You have a Spatula that allows you to have some flexibility here. So that's the first big difference. The other one is the way this interfaces with items. Cultist, you had no method of getting items onto Galio. Mech was 3 random items, but the way that played out was you would put 3 items on one of your units so you knew exactly what you were getting. Here, the 3 Abominations closest to the grave, and the grave is where the Monstrosity always comes from. It's actually a piece of the board that is kind of reserved in a particular place that literally changes the shape of your board, which also has some implications. But the 3 Abominations that are closest to the grave, each one of those gives one of their items. You can still control this, but that limits you to putting exactly 1 item, almost in a cybernetic fashion, on each of these individual units. You can even itemize a 4th one if you want. They just need to not be the thing that's the closest to the grave. So a lot of stuff to play around here. Again, another little positioning puzzle going on here as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting puzzle too, because you see here, like, Callista is AD related, Brand is AP related, Nunu's kind of tanky, and Ryze is kind of utility mana. So they all want different items. But then the monstrosity itself kind of wants physical damage. Its spell does scale with AP, but it still needs the damage inherent to it. So there's a really interesting itemization puzzle, and it'll be fun to see what people figure out as sort of like the ideal Abomination comp.
And you're going to have to figure out what to pair this. There's only 4 units here, so you need to fill out the rest of your comp. And we've seen a lot of different ways that people have played around the rest of this comp as well. None of these champions share any class, so you'll have to kind of figure out what you're pairing it with.
Yep. So yeah, expect to see a lot of Abomination. And the other thing, we just saw Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayers love killing Abominations. So.
Yes.
All right. Moving on. Redeem. So now we're on the good side. Is that right?
Yes. We're into the heroes, the protectors, the forces of good fighting against evil. Redeemed is the biggest of the group. 8 units here, a very traditional kind of 3/6, and then a 9 that does require a spatula. This has some elements of light to it, but it is armor, magic resist, and ability power that passes splitting amongst the remaining allies. And yes, that does mean by the end of the fight, you get a ton of these stats onto your final unit. So you've got some early game early fight survivability that allows you to kind of make one of those backline units, whether it be Kayle or Vel'Koz or Varus, or like, we've even seen some Luxes that have popped off in late game fights. With this ability. Also, we're not talking too much about abilities here, but know that Syndra is not her set 2 version. Lux is not her set 4 version. These and Vel'Koz is not exactly his set 3 version either. So there's more new spell, and Kayle's a new spell as well. So there's actually people have been talking about these being a lot of reprint champions or champions returning from old sets. Actually, they're really not.
Yeah, we should actually... I'm going to take a second and kind of go back a little bit here. So we're going to start at Forgotten here. Let's just call out the ones that are reprints so that people can be surprised at which ones aren't. So Vayne is a reprint. Warwick is a kind of reprint, but has been buffed with a twist. He's been buffed a lot. Hecarim is a reprint. Thresh is not. Katarina is not. And Draven is. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. Nightbringer... Vlad is a reprint. Morgana is a reprint. That's it.
Correct.
Okay. Coven. Lissandra is a reprint. LeBlanc is a reprint. Morgana is a reprint. So these are all reprints. Although Lissandra got a big buff.
Yes.
So she has the built-in Dazzler effect in her spell now. Hellions. Only Poppy and Ziggs are reprints. The rest are not. Dragon Slayer, no reprints. All new. And then Abomination, only Nunu is a reprint.
Yep, and that's our one, if you were spotting what the character was that's on 4.5 today, Festival of Beasts, and is staying in the set, it is Nunu and Willem. So.
Yep. And so now here we are in Redeemed, where Leona is a reprint, and that's it. So.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of these spells... By the way, the Vel'Koz spell is probably one of my favorite new spells, because I think we took Vel'Koz, who kind of struggled in Galaxies, into like, this is definitely Vel'Koz. This feels very, very much better Vel'Koz.
Yep. We'll say it's a version of the beam, but I would love players to kind of see this for the first time in a YouTube video or GIF or play it themselves, because it's if I just describe it to you, it won't do it justice.
I'm ready to meme it though. I have a great meme for it from 2005. So all right, Dawnbringer. Dawnbringer is sort of the counter to Nightbringer. And go ahead.
Yeah, so very mirrored to Nightbringer. They both have the same, what we call an input, which is when they drop below 50% health, something happens. Instead of shielding, they get a heal. It's kind of actually a rapid heal over time, so it kind of takes a bit to tick up. And when you get to a crazy health number like 150, why does that even make sense? It's actually over time. So if you're taking a lot of damage still, you might not even waste all of that healing. And then they give their team bonus damage. So it plays pretty differently than Nightbringer in terms of, more so than Nightbringer, you want like a lot of these to start to fall below the threshold, but not necessarily like need to ramp up their full damage. So your Karma, who's a kind of somewhat spammy ramping caster in the backline is getting a lot of benefit from your Gragas or your Riven or your Nidalee from taking enough damage to give her some bonus.
Yep, and sort of mirroring the effect here, Garen's spell is a giant magic shred, which then powers up Karma to do a ton of damage after the shred here. So again, that's kind of your late game fantasy here if you want to build that around the God King. And then the other call out here being that Kha'Zix is the only reprint here. Is that right?
Yeah, Soraka is in the... it's too different. Never mind. I was going to say... so, yeah, it's really just Kha'Zix.
I guess Nidalee you could argue is like kind of similar, but it's pretty different.
It's pretty different.
Yeah, so... All right, moving on. Verdant. Verdant is a weird one. Much more of a utility trait. Again, you're not logging on and saying, I'm playing a Verdant comp. That's not a thing.
Absolutely. It's a more form of late game. It's not even defense. It's, anti crowd control. So you might not even always want to play this in the late game. Do I already have a Quicksilver or not? What is the rest of the lobby playing? Am I needing to deal with Threshes hooking my backliners or Volibears who are kind of doing AoE CC? So a lot of connections to this trait as well. Two of the three champions here have three different traits. So the only other thing that's worth noting here is they don't provide this bonus to themselves. So if I just have a Kayle and don't have either Taric or Ashe next to Kayle, yep, I'm not getting the crowd control immunity. So there's also some positioning challenges here of you can find ways to give your entire army crowd control immunity, but that's going to require you to be more clumped and more vulnerable to things like Vel'Koz.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, this is a good utility one. And again, Ashe is the only reprint here. Taric is brand new and Kayle is brand new. So cool. All right, Draconic. Certainly the one that is going to get compared to Fortune. Don't quite think it's as crazy as Fortune, but generally the idea here being that if you have Draconic, you start getting eggs. Eggs hatch. Kind of an interesting system, but maybe a little confusing. Why don't you dive into that?
Yes, so there's a 3-piece and a 5-piece. At 3, you get kind of normal dragon eggs. There's still a variety of eggs that you can get of different sizes, particularly. Size determines 2 things. It determines how long it takes to hatch between 1 and 4 full rounds. And it determines how big the reward is. So a 1-turn egg is more likely to hatch an Udyr, for example. But a 4-turn egg might have more powerful things in it, higher cost champions or kind of other rewards. I don't want to spoil the whole things that are available from this. Take all of that, and then once you got the 5-piece, you have golden versions of those eggs with even more options as to what can drop here. If I had to compare what this plays the most similar to, I think it plays more like Bard from 3.5 than it does Fortune for 2 reasons. One, there's involvement with your bench, and like long-term like continuous payout of power, right? Like Fortune had this very sharp, I kind of have this plan, I get this payout, and then I usually transition out, or maybe if I'm in 6 Fortune, I try to snowball that. This is, hey, I'm constantly getting value, so if I can play this very early, I'm trying to get ahead of the economic pace of the lobby, or just trying to kind of snowball the game out of control. So that's what we're doing with Draconic.
The big thing to note here, too, is that Draconic 5, to get those golden eggs, requires Heimerdinger. There's no spatula here, so you definitely need Heimerdinger. In that regard, it reminds me of Space Pirate, where you needed the Gangplank. And those golden eggs can be very valuable, but again, some of them also can take 4 turns. There is a very rare golden egg that takes 5 turns, very low drop rate, but if you can get that, that's your YouTube highlight for you, so... All right. Oh, and the other thing is Draconic is also, because you get so many Draconic champions from the eggs, it's probably, if you like 3-starring champions, this is probably the trait for you.
Yes.
All right. Ironclad. This is such an interesting trait, and it opens up so many weird builds because we're so used to Mystic, where Mystic was like, okay, cool, and you had Vanguard, though, that were very selfish. Ironclad is now the Mystic for physical damage. And we see this, and because it's a 2-3, you can kind of opt into it. And there's a spatula, so you can even do that. And I know I favor this a lot in our playtests, but this is just a nice little utility trait that you can get if you're dealing with a lot of physical damage.
Yeah, this is one that is kind of much more about kind of the shape of your lobby or kind of what you need to beat. I suspect this is one of those traits that players will play more often than they should, right? They'll just have a rel in their redeemed build, and they'll be like, I could throw in a Jax, and that, you know, I turn on another trait, even though that might not be the best thing that you could be doing compared to turning on a higher tier of offensive trait for something else you have, or you know, you'll even sometimes go Ironclad 3, and that will just be a mistake. Now, don't get me wrong, this is very powerful. You will want to play this in a lot of situations. If you need to deal with the Dravens or the Aphelioses of the world, like, this is a strong option. This also has a spatula, which is a little, you know, non-standard. We've never had a Mystic spatula, but being able to kind of slot in Ironclad through that has also been very powerful.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I've been enjoying, like, Jax as a carry. He's just a fun carry. Another one of our melee carries, but very high attack speed, very high damage output, so can be pretty fun.
Yep. Nautilus is a reprint here. The other two are obviously new, so.
Yep, good call out. All right. Revenant. Hey, Witty, what's it like to get a free GA in your
it was so funny that kind of perfectly lined up from that April Fool's video. But yeah, here we have not so free GA, because making traits is not an act with no trade-offs. But this is a late game powerhouse if you want to or need to play around it. It revives in a similar fashion to Guardian Angel, also stacks with Guardian Angel, so if you just have a GA on one of these units, you get 2 revives. After they revive, you have both bonus damage and take increased damage, which is kind of mostly a negative for these champions, minus Nocturne, who actually has some really strong damage output as he's another kind of pseudo reprint from set 2. But you're gonna I think very often want to slot this in the late game because it's just very powerful when you can get it. But again, it's very expensive, so oftentimes you just won't be able to play this.
Yep. Nocturne is kind of a reprint here. He'll give you that Blender vibe a little bit with his high attack speed, gaining health and spinning, and no mana. Ivern is probably, I think, the most staple 4-cost of the set. Summoning Daisy offers a lot of utility and really good traits. So yeah, and then it is a spatula, which means you're kind of building a GA if you're running Revenant, a free GA, if you will.
Yes.
Cool. All right, and then Eternal is our last origin, and this one is special to Kindred. What this basically means is that Kindred I can actually separate Wolf and Lamb. They're 2 separate units when you place them, each with their own spell. Kindred's spell is actually a reprint spell from set 1. It's the AoE circle that protects your team for a bit. But Wolf, their spell is actually a bite, kind of like this set's Kindred, where it has a very low mana cost. It bites and then comes back and heals the 2 of them. So the 2 of them actually work together, which is really cool to see. And the other thing to note here is that they share stat bonuses from items. So for example, if you Warmogs your Kindred, your Wolf also gets the 1,000 health. They do not share item effects, so you cannot put Infinity Edge and have them both have 100% crit. You cannot put Zeeks and have 2 Zeeks lying around. That doesn't work, and Force of Nature, that someone tried to think about, but nope, it's just stats.
Yep, shared stats, which can still be very powerful, kind of making, you just think about having a Warbogs and having suddenly 2,000 additional effective health on your team is nothing to be sad about. But 2 units to position around. They also both benefit from the other one being alive. Wolf spell heals Lamb, and Lamb spell always makes Wolf invulnerable, regardless of Wolf being in the circle. So you want to keep them both alive as well. We've seen some cool stuff here. At the end of the day, this is kind of a lot like what set 1 Kindred did in terms of being really, really powerful utility. But I hope to see some more kind of carry builds, try to ramp up that Wolf as well. So
Cool. All right, on to classes. And I figure as we talk about the classes, we should also take a minute to talk about some of the 5 costs we haven't yet. But Assassin is back. Assassin, kind of a reprint here. They jump to the back line just like they did in set 4. They get bonus critical strike. 2 Assassins always good because now their abilities can crit. Pretty straightforward. Katarina and Nocturne can both act as primary carries for this trait. They're both quite good. Kha'Zix's, not as much. LeBlanc's more utility. Diana's a bit more utility, can work. And then there's Viego. Why don't you talk about Viego?
Yep. So Viego does not have a unique trait, but does have a very unique spell. What he does is he attempts to change the team of his target. So the way he does this is he begins to channel on them, dealing damage over a few seconds and stunning them. If they die while he is doing this, they swap teams. They go back to full health, kind of almost resurrected onto his team. They still have their items. They get the benefit of Viego's team's traits rather than their own. So if you can invest in your Viego, position him well, and pick off important units, not only are you getting a very powerful CC spell, a very powerful damage spell, but you're getting a unit onto your team. So very scary. That is a channel spell, so this can be difficult to pull off. He can get interrupted by a lot of things. But protecting him, building around him, getting him multiple casts so he has a shot at getting multiple units, this guy's going to be very scary. So if you need to deal with a key backliner in Reckoning, this is your guy to pick up.
Yeah, I think some of the most fun interactions usually involve Syndra versus Viego, so we'll have to see how those fights go. So Viego definitely looking to be a bit of a spicy unit this set. All right, Ranger. Rangers are back. They shoot their bows and arrows, and they go pew, 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 and they shoot very fast. And we already talked a bit about Kindred, so we don't need to go too deep into there. But Rangers, they go pew, pew. Anything to add?
Yeah, if you were on the first half of this presentation, you're like, wow, everything is so complicated in terms of the traits. Well, our origins tend to be more complicated in our classes. You're going to see a lot of the simpler stuff on this half of the trait rev, Rangers included. You'll notice it's a little different than what this was in set 1 or 2. Now the kind of coordination of attack speed bonus happens all at the same time amongst the Rangers rather than kind of being spread out through RNG. So.
Sweet. Brawler. Brawlers gain HP.
Woo! It's back. With the note that having only 5 units and a 2/4 piece should make this play pretty differently than it does on Festival of Beasts right now. You can't build this as I'm just building 6 or 8 brawlers and this is my whole team. You have to, combine this with Rangers or combine this with Spellweavers or build around Abomination. We've seen Brawler Abomination builds all the time. So this is more of a supplemental trait that gives you a good front line and no more attack damage. So we're back to just gives you health.
I do think 4 Brawler is still kind of like Festival of Beasts, still one of the best starts you can get if you get a Nunu out of an orb and get lucky and hit all the Brawlers. But like you said, transitioning from there isn't just buy all the Brawlers. It's a lot more complicated than that. So, and then Volibear's spell we haven't talked about yet. Why don't you explain Volibear's smashing spell? Yes,
so Volibear is kind of our premier crowd control unit of the set. He uses a version of his ultimate ability from Summoner's Rift, leaps forward kind of behind his target and smashes a very large area around himself, knocking up and stunning everyone in that area. And with a little extra utility, he also removes any shields that are on those units. So if you need to deal with a shielding heavy comp or a specific problematic shield unit, you should also be considering Volibear. But honestly, in the late game, hey, if you got you don't know what your 9th unit is when you went to level 9, Volibear is probably a pretty good option.
Yeah. Reminds me of Amumu in that regard. Just a more flashy and more fun Amumu who also breaks shields. So definitely a cool unit.
Yeah, something to position away from if you're dealing in the late game and you're trying to pick which side of the board you're on. Definitely try to stay away from the Volibear if you can, or spread out.
Exactly. All right, Legionnaire. Now here we finally have a class that is different. Why don't you explain Legionnaire?
Yes, so Legionnaires get bonus attack speed. That's kind of the core of their power, but they also get this second piece, which is after each of their casts, they heal. The next time they hit with a basic attack or a spell that does physical damage, which still counts as an attack, they get a % of healing from that spell. There's a lot of things to talk about as to why this structure plays differently than a lot of other things. It's a little less one note than maybe some of our attack speed classes have been in the past in terms of kind of how these different units play. We all know what Draven does. He's kind of the ultimate DPS, a bit of ramping, huge chunky hits with his axes. But you got someone like Mordekaiser who can act as a bit of a mix of a frontliner or an AP carry. You've got Callista who's throwing spears from the backline that is able to pierce units and doing some chunky damage. You've got Aatrox who uses a version of his Summoner's Rift passive where he stabs, healing himself and dealing a lot of damage. And we've seen some 3-star Aatroxes that are kind of very, very difficult to kill. So, yeah, I suspect to see... I'd suspect more like Duelist. You know, a lot of the times this will be more of a... I'll play this as a 4-piece to enable my Draven or my Mordekaiser. Sometimes you'll go to 6, maybe if you have a Spatula, or maybe if you're kind of in the right circumstance too. But, yeah, excited for this one.
Yeah, like I said, I see this a lot more as a 4. I see a lot of 4s of these. Makes Draven good. Unlike Chrono, it's just like, here, have a bunch of attack speed. Go, go, go. Which I don't think we've ever given this much upfront attack speed before, so that feels pretty good. But we also have to talk about the ticking time bomb known as Kayle.
Kayle is back as a 5-cost, but not with her set 1 ability. Kayle has a passive effect. Doesn't use the mana bar. Every 5 seconds, Kayle ascends to her next form, and there are 4 total forms. Each of these forms gives Kayle some different bonus that modifies her attacks. It starts by allowing her attacks to do some bonus true damage based on her attack damage. Then all of her attacks splash to nearby enemies, including that true damage. Then, every 7th attack, she gives herself a brief bit of damage immunity, a little bit of a shout-out to that set 1 spell. And then finally, if she makes it a full, at least at 1 star, 20 seconds into the fight, every one of her attacks does a massive rain of swords that does a ridiculous amount of damage.
Yep.
If you let Kayle get to her final form, and she's auto-attacking, you are going to lose. The damage is insurmountable. So the point is, stop her, end the fight early, pick her off with your Assassins or your Viego or your Vel'Koz. Like, don't let her get to that form is what you're looking for here.
Yeah. When she hits that form, your team disappears pretty quickly. So it's definitely a fun champion. And there's some cool strategies about making very tanky comps with Kayle as your carry. So should be fun to see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Renewer. Probably the comp I think I've played the most in our playtest. I kind of abused the hell out of this, although we did just nerf it. But Renewer, basically health regen and if they're at full health, mana regen. So pretty powerful at keeping them alive. And because it's percent-based, the higher their health, the more value you're getting out of it. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. This is kind of another one of those tricky things. Not quite the same as Brawler, but you're probably playing Renewer plus something else. You need to figure out how to use this set of 4, or maybe even occasionally set of 2, to get the most benefit from it. They all benefit in very different ways. Lyssandra's a backline DPS with a bit of utility. Vladimir operates mostly as a frontline tank. Soraka's got a very powerful utility spell this time around, applying Mana Reave to a large number of units. Ivern's summoning Daisy, giving you some crowd control and extra defense. And then we can talk about Heimerdinger here.
Yes.
So
actually, let's save Heimerdinger for Caretaker.
Oh, we can save it for Caretaker. That makes sense.
Yep.
To tease you with Heimer.
Yep.
But
yep.
he likes Renewer, is what I'll say, a lot.
Yeah, the pro tip I have for Renewer is the health regen, it's fine. It's good. It's not going to, like, win you fights, but it's good. It's good health regen. The thing that's going to win you fights is the mana regen. Being able to cast your spells that much quicker is really important. So finding ways to keep your Renewers at full health, things like Locket, things like good positioning, so that they can get a bunch of mana from this trait and cast their spell frequently and early, will win you fights.
Yeah, there's a bit of a tension here where a lot of people will look at this and want to play this as a healing trait, but kind of the most powerful way you can play this is as a mana trait. So you're trying to use the healing or protect with other means to get the mana, because casting a lot is really powerful in TFT.
Yep. And there's a spatula of this, which can open up some really cool combinations as well. So.
Yep.
And you'll notice, by the way, there's a lot of spatulas. If you're curious why there are 16 spatulas, be sure to check out the shadow item video that probably went up 15 minutes before this one. So hopefully you've already seen it, but if you're watching out of order, don't watch out of order. All right, Invoker, the super easy to balance trait that we've had so far. Let's talk about Invoker.
Yeah, so this is a team-wide benefit. Applies to all of your units, not just your Invokers, although the Invokers themselves like getting some extra mana a lot. Again, they're kind of a mixed bag of different casters. Syndra's, some excellent single-target CC. Ivern, we've talked about. Karma's backline DPS, and Teebo's got a bit of damage, but a lot of utility as well. But you should be thinking about this trait honestly, kind of like you thought about Ocean if you played set 2, of, hey, what would be a unit that I need more mana on? It's got some difference, though, because it is based on your attacking, so you need to make sure that's something that at least has okay attack speed, or maybe you give them an attack speed item and try to make extra use of this. But if you're into the late game and you're looking to supplement your offensive or casting ability, this is one to watch out for.
Yeah, a favorite of mine here is, like, you run 6 Redeemed, Vel'Koz is your carry who needs that mana to attack, and then you throw in an Ivern, and you've got 2 Invoker helping that Vel'Koz attack much quicker. So some pretty cool combos there. And Syndra, by the way, I can't stress enough, such a fun champion.
Excited to see some people. People are getting yeeted with Syndra. So yes,
yep. All right, Knight's back.
Knight is back, and it plays very differently than it did in set 1. First, it's very accessible early. Knight was in set 1 as well, but that part didn't change. But I'll remind people who either don't remember set 1 well or haven't played in a lot of time, having 40 block, basically take whatever damage at the end you would have taken and just chop 40 off of that in the early game is incredibly powerful. After going through armor calculations, like, often units don't even do 40 damage with their basic attacks at early parts of the game, so you might be entirely preventing damage. This is team-wide, so not only you're trying to either make maybe a super tanky 3-star Poppy or using one of Garen and Darius in the late game, but you might be looking at some totally other unit. Maybe you're protecting your Aphelios in your Nightbringer composition, and giving him just a bunch of extra defense is really powerful. The way this interacts with different abilities also has a lot of strategic implications, right? Flat damage reduction is very good against damage over time. It's very good against a lot of little instances of damage, right? Like, really rapid auto attackers are really bad against Knights. Again, a wide variety of units here. These are not just all tanks. You've got Thresh, who's going to be hooking backliners, Garen and Darius, who are armor and MR shred and have a decent amount of damage themselves. So a lot of ways to play this, either as a 2, as a 4, as a 6, a lot of options.
Yeah, I think a couple callouts for me is it's not quite as powerful as it was in set 1, specifically because Garen and Darius used to be 1-cost knights that could actually deal a good amount of damage. Leona, Poppy to some extent, but Leona, Nautilus, and Thresh are not damage dealers. So if you're level 4 and you run 4 knight, you're tanking a bunch, but you're not really killing anything. So in that regard, it ends up being a little weaker. But with things like Ironclad and Mystic now, late game it ends up being quite a bit stronger and quite a bit more interesting, because, as Witty pointed out, it happens after all the calculations. So you can run something like 3 Ironclad, 4 Knight, the armor reduces the damage down, then the Knight reduces it further, and you end up with a very, very tanky comp. Cool.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about the God Kings on the God King slide, so we'll keep teasing you with different 5 costs.
All right, Spellweaver. Spellweavers get increased ability power, and then anytime a champion uses an ability, so it kind of ramps up, they get more. So, for example, for Spellweaver, you start at 50 and end at 100.
Yeah, and to point out, it's anytime any champion on either team casts an ability, so you can try to accelerate this yourself if you're building blue buff Ziggs or blue buff Brand or or Shojin Zyra or something, but you don't really need to. This isn't a highly situational trait. I'd say this is less situational than Dragon Slayer is. Mostly you can play this as I'm getting a good chunk of ability power. As long as the fight's not super quick, I can expect to get this kind of ramping up and try to carry through mostly Vel'Koz, although there's Brand builds and Zig builds and Zyra builds and Victor builds, and they have a little bit of mixes of utility in different places, where Zyra has some CC, Victor has shielding, Brand has magic resist shreds. So if you want your kind of core caster comp out of the set, this is the group of units to go for.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most about this is that Zyra, who's mostly like a Lux utility kind of spell, has actually ended up pretty strong as a carry if you're running 4 Spellweaver with the right items.
Yeah, easier to 3-star if you're playing Draconic as well, so you can get that just 3-star, 3-cost carry. Yeah.
So, and then I can't say enough good things about Vel'Koz, so have fun with that one. All right, Skirmisher. This is a weird one, but if you can pull it off, it feels pretty good.
Yeah, so Skirmishers, there's a lot of ways to use this trait. Big upfront shield, which is always powerful in TFT, kind of making sure that you don't kind of get blown out in the early part of a fight. And they use that shield to gain benefit from their ramping attack damage, which a lot of these units love, but not all of them. Some of them actually don't even care very much about the attack damage, but the benefit that they get then is you don't need to itemize them, and you can make use of just strong utility of someone like Kennen or Trundle, who's good at taking down tanks and is makes more benefit from the AP, or even Pantheon, who's more of a defensive profile. So I think this is one that will take a little bit longer for players to understand exactly who to itemize or kind of how to play around it, although, hint, Jax really loves every part of this, so if you want to play the simplest version of Skirmisher, just play it through Jax. But I think there's a lot of different versions here as well, and ways to, I think the good news here is you won't just say, hey, I just have a bunch of AD units, only if I have a bunch of AD items can I play this. There's going to be some other methods to make this work. Yeah, I had a very fun Lee Sin build the other day.
That's the thing I'd actually like to call out with this, is one of the criticisms we got with 4.5 after the loss of Dusk was that there weren't a lot of builds that you could play with defensive items. This is a build I think you can very much get away with defensive items, because especially at 6 where you're getting 10 AD a second, if you can survive and tank with those tanky items for a long time, all of a sudden your tanky carry also has an extra 200 attack damage and is doing just fine without those offensive items.
Yeah, 10 AD a second is nuts. I mean, if you're staying alive in a fight, like, even if your unit is not normally a good auto attacker, like Kennen, like, you just give any unit hundreds of AD, they're gonna be doing a lot of damage.
Yep. So, and the shield helps them do that. So, should be a fun trait. All right, Mystic. Mystic is back, but with one, I think, very important change, which is it is now a 2/3/4.
Yep. I mean, one of the things we're broadly looking for with Reckoning is some of the most flexibility and variety of builds than we've ever seen out of a TFT set, and this is another one of those pieces, right? Like, sometimes it was very difficult to figure out if you were supposed to make the jump from 2 to 4, and it kind of restricted what final compositions could look like. So now with a 3-piece, you'll still want that 4 a lot. It's not like the 4 is any weaker than it's been in the past, but there will be circumstances where you can stop at 3 and use your kind of trait construction to get some other value. Also, Mystic is always plays pretty differently just depending on what the Mystic units are, and that hasn't changed here. You have kind of a variety of ways to potentially carry with some of them, like Morgana, who, even though she has a major stun as a reprint unit, also does a large amount of damage. You can play through the Kindred and Wolf combo. We've even seen some like Rise Morello builds, or just keep your Lux alive forever builds with Redeemed and Mystic. So there's a few ways to play this.
Yeah, for sure. Rise is definitely one of the more unique spells, as he CCs 1 unit, and then his next cast CCs like, what, 5 units?
It depends on how many are near that unit, but a lot.
Yeah. So really powerful. Definitely not Mystic of old, so give it a try. All right, where are we at here? Cavalier. Oh, Cavalier. This one, ended up really fun. The innate is so cool watching the horses dash around, and then as they dash around, they double their power here. So, for example, if you're running 3 Cavalier, you can have 40% damage reduction on these frontliners, which is really cool.
Yeah, this is our kind of most selfish defensive frontline trait, except maybe Brawler, but they play pretty differently. And this one, I think, is a little easier to carry into the late game with a really powerful utility spell like Rels, or being able to play like Carry Kled. But it really just depends. Also, unlike Brawler, you can stop at 3 here and don't need to necessarily play 4, so you can just play your Hecarim, Sejuani, Rel frontline. It's a Spatula too, and having any unit in the game able to have... I mean, think about being able to use Assassin Spatula and having the power of jumping into the backline. This has some similar properties where just being able to constantly gap close to your target, right? Whether there's just a lot of units spread out and you're a melee unit, or you got like moved or shoved by someone like Syndra or Thresh, having that quick, and it's fast. This unit gets right back into the fight with this dash. So, also note, this is a Shadow Spatula and Chain make Ironclad, Shadow, Chain, and Spatula make Cavalier. So
I got that wrong in the doc. Okay.
Small error. For those who are really keeping notes of all 16 Spatulas,
Yep.
and you're confused, that's the thing.
My mistake. The other thing I want to call out, you said it's a Spatula. My favorite has definitely been the Abomination Cavalier. Watching that thing charge around, because the Abomination or the Monstrosity can definitely get Spatula traits. Watching him charge around and punch things is S+.
Yep. And we'll see. If you're watching this video, you might not still know. I have not seen very many correct guesses as to what the monstrosity is online. So
they should know by now, because I think the Monday stuff would have done it. But we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
You have to check it out.
All right, God Kings. Why don't you talk about some God Kings?
So yes, this is a pretty different trait in that it is very situational and very late game. You only get the benefit if you have exactly 1 God King. And the benefit is they deal bonus damage, which can be pretty significant especially if you're itemizing either Darius or Garen. But they get it against a very specific set of traits. It will take players a while to kind of learn the circumstances or really be able to think about this. And I think this is the closest we've come to doing another version of Paragon, which was Janna's unique trait in 3.5, where you need to really be thinking about the shape of the lobby, whether or not this is an important thing to slot in. Sometimes in a way you might not expect, right? You might just want to be playing Garen in a very evil heavy lobby. So I'm excited for this one. Should be fun.
Yeah, I think the God Kings are probably the most interesting puzzle of like when to run them. Because they now come with Knight, which is a good time to like bolster up the defenses of your champ's late game. As you said, they have the God King trait, which allows them to counter specific builds. And then they also, like we talked about earlier, Darius is the armor shred, Garen is the magic shred. They both provide that in spades. So like you could be running a Spellweaver comp, see a Garen, and go, this is going to be worth, because now I can shred through their defenses. So there's a lot of utility behind these champions, and they're pretty powerful. They're not just like low damage. So definitely some cool champions here.
So let's talk in detail a little bit about, since we have really gone through each of the spells in more detail. So Garen has God Lion's Justice. What this does is it brings down a massive AoE of % of enemy health damage as magic damage and shreds all targets in the area. This also provides Garen with a large shield, depending on his maximum health. So again, it's kind of a mixed unit, some offensive power, some defensive power, and a lot of layers of situationality. Do you need that extra frontline tank combined with Knight? Do you need to deal with some evil traits? Do you need the magic shred? These are all potential reasons you might want to play Garen in the late game. Darius is the mirror of that. Darius has... Godwolf's Carnage. Godwolf's Carnage is he transforms into a wolf and leaps towards a far enemy, dealing a large amount of physical damage based on his AD and shredding their armor. But not only will Darius become a wolf, but he will become a pack of wolves, and those wolves will do the same thing to a few other nearby targets. So also an AoE spell, but physical and armor shred. Also gives him some healing based on his percent max health as well, so that he can actually survive and attempt to repeat the pattern if you itemize him. So again, a lot going on here, but should be fun to try to figure out the puzzle of whether or not you're getting maximum value of these in the late game.
Yep, for sure. All right, I think we got 2 left. Cruel, Teemo. We've talked about this one in previews before, but now it's finally time to talk about Teemo.
Yes, so Teemo is cruel. Cruel means 2 things. First is it is just a descriptor of the fact that Teemo does not cost gold. He costs health. If you don't have 6 health, you can't buy Teemo. That means 2-star Teemo is 18 health, and 3-star Teemo is 54 if I'm doing quick math. Sometimes this is very bad for you. You're in the late game. You only have 20 or so HP, and you're like, it seems like I can't even buy a Teemo in this circumstance, even though I might not want him. You have to decide whether or not you want to take that risk. But sometimes, people talk about free GA. Sometimes it feels like you're just getting him for free. You got a big health lead. You make it to level 7 or 8. You're sitting on 60 or 70 HP. Sweet. I don't care about that 6 HP. I'd rather have the gold and keep having a good economy so that I can make it to level 9. And so sometimes this feels quite good. And then Cruel. I don't even know how much we want to talk about Cruel at this stage, at the second half of Cruel. So we'll let that one go.
Cruel, yeah, second half of Cruel, just enjoy the show when it happens.
Yep.
About his spell is very similar to set 4 or set 3 Teemo. It's the AoE Shroom throw. Throws the shrooms, they do AoE damage, surprisingly high amount of damage. But since he is a legendary unit now, it also provides the attack speed slow. So he's really good in any comp, and he's got Invoker as a tag. So it's like that 2 Invoker with a Teemo late game, very powerful in just like almost any comp.
Yep, if you're looking for some late game utility, if you need the Invoker mana, if you're just playing Hellion as a vertical, or you just need a way to slow backliners' attack speed, a lot of reasons that you might pick up a Teemo. He also tends, I think, to be a little bit more powerful than the average legendary, just to kind of justify the health cost as well. So again, if you're just doing none of those things, but you see some Teemos and you just have a lot of health to spend in the late game and to try to close it out, Teemo might be a good option for you.
Yep. Agreed. All right, that leaves us with our last class, Caretaker.
So Caretaker is Heimerdinger's unique trait. This does is Heimerdinger always comes with a baby dragon kind of deployed as a pair that can be positioned separately. The baby dragon gets 100% of Heimerdinger's attack speed, and if the baby dragon dies, it gives mana back to Heimerdinger. This is all to facilitate Heimerdinger's ability, which is if there is no baby dragon, so if it has died for whatever reason, he'll make a new one. That also is part of the mana refund, is so that, you're trying to keep your turret alive. But mostly you want to keep the turret alive. You don't want to keep remaking them, because the powerful part of the turret is if Heimerdinger casts his spell while the turret is alive, he will command it to launch 3 very large, high damage plus burn applying fireballs that kind of pass through units. It's going to pierce through your front line. It's going to hit back lines. If you can get even 2 casts of that spell during a fight, their team is going to get incinerated. Yep. So high damage, but you need to be able to protect both of these units. If Heimerdinger is dead, that fireball spell never happens from the baby dragon. If the baby dragon keeps dying, Heimer keeps needing to waste his mana to try to recreate the dragon. So, and one little positioning trick too. The baby dragon is also immune to crowd control, so you can try to use it as a bait for certain types of spells. Or, you don't need to protect it from CC. You need to protect the Heimerdinger from CC because Heimerdinger is the one who's empowering the dragon. But a lot of little positioning pieces going on here.
Yeah, he's certainly been very strong, and he's one of those 5 costs that doesn't need his traits, right? Like, he doesn't need Draconic, and Renewer's nice, but he doesn't need it. He is just a very powerful AP caster that you can pretty much throw in if you've got the items and the way to protect him. And that burn damage is really powerful if you're dealing... Because, again, it's true damage burn. So if you're dealing with, you know, a bunch of Knights, a bunch of Ironclads or Mystics, really good option in the late game.
Yep, it's got the anti-healing property that Morello and Sunfire has as well. So if you're looking at this set and going, there's so much healing going on, Heimerdinger is an excellent kind of outlet to kind of dealing with that problem. So
yep.
Even if you don't have a Morellos.
All right, so this is the last slide, and we just hit an hour as of filming this. So I'm going to wrap it up with one question that everyone's going to ask, because it's the most common question I've already seen, and then we'll close it out, which is, where did Aurelion Sol and Shyvana go? Because it was in the preview video, and everyone's like, where'd they go?
So, I mean, we've talked about this before, but every set, we don't know exactly what the 58 champions that are going to be in it from the very beginning. Both of them were in a very early version of the set, early enough that we hadn't even shipped Festival of Beasts yet, where we actually added Aurelion Sol and Shyvana back into the game. We looked at other opportunities for their spells changing rather than entirely removing them from the set, but it just didn't make sense. So really all you've seen is a little bit of insight into our development process, where champions come and go, abilities change, traits change, and you saw an early version is the short of it.
Are there any other fun champions you feel like didn't quite make the cut? I can think of two.
I'm trying to think if there are any that I want to talk about versus...
All right, fair.
Some of those things might just... I know one that I would love to talk about, but I'm pretty sure they're going to make it into 5.5. So
okay.
We'll leave it a secret for now.
Fair enough. All right, so yeah, that is going to do it for the champions and traits. We think this is looking to be pretty advanced set, but with the set mechanic as well as some of the changes, we think it'll be a pretty fun set. Definitely very high skill expressive. We're hoping there's a lot of cool end game compositions that are possible, some adaptability plays, things like that. Anything you want to say to everybody before they start playing in a few hours?
I'm so excited to just get people to start playing this. New sets are always fun. Bear with us while we fix bugs and balance on PBE, but should make for a better launch. And yeah, keep. I love our community. I love the passion. I love all the excitement, and new sets really bring that to a peak. So I'm excited. All right. Excited to play myself. I want to be able to just log in at night on the PBE and just play some games instead of having to get a bunch of coworkers together and get a lobby together. So
yeah, who wants to play with those coworkers? Am I right?
You're just not all available to play at 1 in the morning. Like, come on, I'm ready to play some games.
True. All right, well, that is going to do it. This is the third of 3 videos, so if you've watched all 3 of these, cool, thank you. And again, PBE hopefully up later today. If not, it'll definitely be up tomorrow. But yeah, enjoy Reckoning, and we can't wait for 3 to 6 months of having fun with this thing, and it's going to be great. So on behalf of everyone who worked on Reckoning, have fun, and we'll see you online.